Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm extremely pleased to have as my guest today Chance Raspberry. Chance is a Los Angeles-based animator, cartoonist, and artist. Born in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in the San Fernando Valley, Chance began showing a profound interest in drawing and cartoons at the age of 2. That interest turned into a passion, and he has since spent his life pursuing a full-time animation career. Chance attended several art schools, including the CalArts Summer School program, the Animation Academy, Otis College of Art and Design, and the LA Academy of Figurative Art. However, it was his Cal State Northridge internship program at the Film Roman Animation Studio that landed him his 12-year career as a lead animator on The Simpsons. While mastering his craft there, Chance also spent his off hours creating and developing his own original animated series, Little Billy, which is inspired by his own life growing up with Tourette syndrome in the 1980s America. It is the world's first and only animated series about life with a neurodiversity. Little Billy is currently in production on Patreon and can be followed and supported at littlebilly.com. The first comic strip was just released, and the first animated short is coming soon. Welcome, Chance. I am so glad you could join me today to discuss your amazing career in animation and address some of the challenges faced by many of those with special needs when it comes to choosing a career and finding employment.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Gilda. It's great to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, and happy President's Day.
Well, thank you so much, and the same to you, Thank you for spending a part of your holiday with me.
My pleasure.
So to begin with, please tell us a little bit about your background and some of the challenges you faced as a person with special needs in school and in your chosen career.
Well, that's always a great place to start and a great question. And it probably, for me, started with just sort of becoming aware that I didn't seem to function exactly like the other kids. I was often, I had a lot of separation anxiety from my parents when they left me at school, which I know most kids have at the young age of preschool and daycare and stuff like that. But as I kind of grew into that, I also became aware of the fact that a lot of the kids, I don't know, just seemed to not necessarily like me, or they didn't understand me. They kind of had this aversion. They didn't really want to get too close or spend time with me. And I remember thinking I don't get this. What's this about? And so the more I sort of found myself feeling kind of isolated and left out, for whatever reason, the more I gravitated to how can I entertain myself? And my parents really, really sort of encourage this idea of you don't have to have, fancy toys or video games or a bunch of friends around you to be happy and to have fun and entertain yourself. So this idea of constantly self-entertainment was always in the forefront of my mind. And, almost immediately and in conjunction with that, I discovered pencils and markers and crayons, and I started drawing. And just being able to make marks on a piece of paper or on any surface, to my parents' dismay, sometimes the walls of the house, it became just this thing that was so fun and expressive and very magical to me, because I realized I could do anything. I could make any shape I want with any color I wanted, and I was in control. So I think that was probably the first place that I felt like I had a say in something, or I was able to do something that I wanted to do, where I was always, on the other hand, in a place where I was being told what to do, or where I was being left out of something or whatever. It was this is the place that I was in control and that I could create the way I saw, my vision. So, of course, I didn't think like that as a 2 or 3-year-old. I just remember thinking crayons are fun. And so, basically that got me into this mindset of I didn't even know why or how I was different yet. I just knew that I was somehow not necessarily fitting in with this norm that I was starting to become aware of in society, in like the social setting of school and daycare and whatnot. So it went from that to just drawing all the time, my parents seeing how much I love to draw, them showing me cartoons, and of course cartoons were happening on TV. There was He-Man and Thundercats and DuckTales and Dennis the Menace and all these great shows that I ultimately grew up loving. But when my parents saw how much I loved to draw, they immediately thought about showing me it was like what they knew. They thought about showing me the masterpieces of animation from when they grew up, which were all the Disney classics and the Looney Tunes and the Popeyes and the, Betty Boops and all these great cartoons that were so well done during the golden age of animation, where you had this suspension of disbelief. The emotions were so strong and the drawings were so well done that you really believed that you were watching living characters with emotions and minds and lives of their own. And of course, that's why Disney's timeless. It emotionally hooks you. So you instantly relate to those characters, you identify, and now you're like, oh, that's like me. And all I wanted to do was watch these films and these short cartoons and experience the way they made me feel and then draw them. And so I would do that. I would pause the tapes. I would look at what I was watching on TV and try to draw it from memory. And that all snowballed into my love and passion for animation, specifically with my art, which is what led me to my career today.
Wow, that's a great story. And it also sounds like it gave you a sense of complete self-expression without judgment. Like it was a place you could go that you felt safe. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's accurate, and you don't have these concepts in your mind at the time, but you're absolutely right. I think looking back on it, that's exactly what it was, and a whole lot more.
So what was your first job, and was it difficult getting that first hire?
It was difficult getting in a position to be hired, and then the job just sort of happened because I was there. And so let me explain. Basically, as I continued to do all this art and this animation, my parents ultimately suggested, hey, is this something you might want to do as a career? As I got into like junior high and high school age, and I just completely saturated myself with animation and history about it, learning all these different things. And so once I sort of decided, this is probably what I want to do with my life and try to make money and a living with this, I started, really taking it more seriously and even spending some of my own money to go to schools like the Animation Academy right when I got out of high school and I was starting off college. It all just sort of started to make sense and come together. And there was a lot of struggles along the way in the sense that I wasn't diagnosed with Tourette syndrome until I was 8. So from the time I started sort of realizing this and expressing myself through art when I was about 2 or 3, about that 5-year window where there was no explanation for why I was so energetic and rambunctious all the time. And it was just impossible for teachers and adults and authority figures to control me. And that tends to cause problems when you're a kid and there's, you're supposed to follow the rules. So basically that all led to me being able to, kind of experience this, the animation and the art in my own way and decide this is what makes me happy. Like, this is what I enjoy in place of friends or in place of, maybe being socially popular or socially involved or active. And that amount of focus and isolation to really just practice and pour myself into the craft of animation is what got me sort of up and running off the ground as far as having the skills to even compete in the professional industry. So I'm not saying you have to become a hermit and isolate yourself and have no life, but it takes so much work and sacrifice and dedication that when that situation is your life by default, it sort of lends itself as a positive thing to a craft like art or a field like animation that is so competitive and so demanding of your time and your energy. So that hyper focus from the Tourette syndrome that, was ultimately diagnosed, and I was put on medication and went to therapy, and there were a lot of great people helping me through it and helping me kind of figure out my balance with all of it. But it ended up becoming like, if I say so myself, almost like a superpower, where I was able to lock this focus into an incredible amount of energy poured into one thing with like zero distraction, because I was so hyper-focused on that one goal, which was drawing and getting better at drawing. And so all of that leads to where I was going to Cal State Northridge, and they had an internship program with Film Roman, which is the studio that for, I guess, 27 or 28 years produced The Simpsons. They were contracted by Fox, and they had made a deal with Cal State Northridge. They needed interns. And so CSUN would provide the interns, and we would, get school credit. We weren't getting paid. We were just getting experience and connections. So basically it was a foot in the door type situation. And they actually didn't have any positions available when I applied. And they said, we'll put you on our list. We'll call you back if a position opens up. And within about 2 weeks, I got a phone call, and I recognized the number. I think I had even stored it in my phone, with my wishful thinking. And so basically, I got the call, and they said, I think someone had to go on maternity leave, one of the other interns, or maybe even one of the employees, and they were short-staffed. So they said, we could use another intern. So I said, yep, start right away. And our animation professor was great, because she said, if you guys get any internship opportunities or job opportunities, just take them, and then don't even bother about waiting to ask us. We'll work with you in whatever capacity you need, because the jobs the jobs come and go, but school will always be here. So not only can you always come back, but we can work with you while you're still here to get those jobs and those opportunities, not let them slip by. So I did that, and I was like just trying to heed the advice of all these people that seem to be like the sage elders with this wisdom of like, this is what you do, this is what you need to do, so do it. So I did it, and I got my foot in the door at the internship. I was there about 18 months, and it was kind of funny. I mean, I was doing really just basic stuff like when all of the films were still being produced on paper, we would have to cut holes. Like there would be actual they would Xerox these animated layout drawings, and they would have the animation holes like Xerox onto the drawings, and we would have to cut them out by hand so that they could then put them on the pegboards to animate from overseas. These were the scenes that they were actually going to ship. And so,
oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, I mean, very much grunt work, but you learn the process, and you get to handle the artwork, and you get to, meet the artists and talk to them, and you make those connections. And what ended up happening was I was there for about a year interning, and you're supposed to only go 2 semesters. And I just sort of begged the head of human resources, like, could you please not make me leave? I will sit in the corner and not bother anybody. Like, please just let me stay here. And I had done so much work that, they were kind of very cool about it. They said, well, we're happy to let you stay. We can find stuff for you to do. Don't worry about it. And of course, when I first got the internship, I'd been given a Simpsons character layout test, which is the animation test. And we'll get into that in a minute, but basically the test just sat in the corner of my room for about a year while I was going to my college courses, trying to finish school, and just drawing, for these classes. And about like a few months before I graduated, I got a little freelance job that almost killed me. It was 1 month having to do a minimum of 500 drawings.
Oh my goodness.
In 1 month, little drawings. Yeah. And it was, I barely made it. I my friend who got me the job helped me, showed me some tricks to speed up the process. And we were doing sketch cards for the second Family Guy trading card series. So they wanted every 25th pack of trading cards to have like one hand-drawn original sketch card that was like signed by an artist in it as a collector's item. So they hired like 14 or 15 artists, and every artist had to produce like 500 cards. And
wow,
it was insane. Yes, I know. I'm like just getting exhausted even thinking back to it. And I remember it was super fun, but super eye-opening. And I remember literally running, like sprinting from my car that I think I probably had to like double park illegally to like run after the FedEx truck on a Friday during rush hour that had already left for the day. And I was like, this is the last day and they're supposed to be there Monday. And so like they were paying for the overnight shipping. All I had to do was get it there. So I caught the truck. They were like really cool about it. They took the package, everything worked out. And I remember like being completely out of breath walking back to my car thinking like, this is going to be my life if I don't really
running
find
after
out
FedEx trucks.
Yeah, exactly. I need to like not be chasing these trucks down. I need to really kind of get like, I don't want this. I want a stable job. And I realized it was like my wake up call for that. And of course, my brain instantly goes to that Simpsons test that's been sitting in the corner collecting dust just because I didn't have time to work on it with all my other college stuff. I really had wanted to start it when they first gave it to me. So I got it out of the corner. I started working on it, and I think I spent like 2.5 months on that test. You're only supposed to take like 2 weeks on it. But when I started taking it, I went to those artists that I had made friends with on The Simpsons, and I said, hey, guys, like, I'm about to take the test. Is it cool if I give you some pointers, or if you give me some pointers and I show it to you and you can give me feedback? And they were like, oh, man, yeah, they didn't miss a beat. They said, please bring it to us. We'll make sure that you do the best job you can. So, of course, I spent 2 weeks, brought it in, and they were like, no, this is not good enough yet. And, like, you're a couple of things work, but let us help you. So I think I took the test like 5 or 6 times over, just to get it perfect. And it was almost just right. It wasn't perfect, but they said, turn it in now. The Simpsons, we just got the call down from Fox. The Simpsons movie has just gone into production, and they're going to be pulling like all these artists off the show. So they actually need people right now. This is the best opportunity you're ever going to have to get hired. Like, take it. So I turned it in.
Wow, your timing worked out just right.
Yeah. It was all about the right place, right time. I mean, they say that, and it sort of starts to sound like a cliche, but it's so true.
So what was it like working on The Simpsons, and do you feel that your challenges held you back in any way, or maybe just the opposite? Because like you mentioned your superpower, that is definitely in this sort of field a huge advantage. And in fact, a lot of people who are on the spectrum or do have certain challenges have very similar ability to just really focus in and, home in on something and just really, get it down and do it until it's right. And that's actually enviable from a certain standpoint, because a lot of people find it very difficult most people would find it very difficult to focus on something that intensely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gilda. I mean, I would not have sort of assumed that, but I couldn't agree more. And I have learned that throughout my life and my experience that yes, it becomes a blessing instead of a curse. And I would just encourage anybody, that has the ability to focus, the ability to see things through from start to finish. That is so rare in this world and in this life. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that I had this thing that is apparently a gift. And now I realize how precious and rare it is, and I don't take it for granted, and I really try to make the most of it and every day that I have with it. And I mean, and time goes so fast, so you really have to. But especially in fields that require, a heavy amount of dedication, focus, and, just specialized skill. If you have some kind of, condition where you maybe can't do all the things that everybody else can do, or you maybe, have a different way of thinking, like that's where the best stuff comes from. That as far as, I mean, this is my opinion, but this is also a fact. Like if you look at history, you have Einstein, you have Disney, you have all of the, like Bill Gates, you have all these guys who who thought differently. They thought outside the box, and even beyond that, they thought in a way that was very unique outside the box. It wasn't like anybody else who thought outside the box, and they just saw something a certain way, and then also had that sort of stars alignment combination of being able to then take what they saw and take what they thought and figured out and apply a skill to it to where it changed the world, or it made everybody think in a new way and be able to see things in a new way, and progress was made, and it's amazing. Like, I love some of these stories I hear, like the creator of Pokemon is autistic, and I just recently found out that apparently Dan Aykroyd has Tourette syndrome, and some of these people weren't even diagnosed while they were doing this great stuff, and then later on it was discovered or whatever, and you just kind of go, well, my goodness, maybe, just maybe, these things that are sort of labeled by society and by the medical world as disabilities or ailments or whatever, they kind of get a negative spin put on them because they don't allow the people that have them to fit into society in the way that society has sort of dictated that this is the way, this is quote unquote normal, but it allows them to make these really amazing advancements that nobody else saw. And you kind of start to think like, well, maybe instead of this being a disability, maybe this is actually an ability, and even beyond that, like a form of genius or a form of inspiration, a form of like brilliance that you just don't really even notice because it's already been labeled by the world as a negative thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I like to personally think of it not as being disabled, but as being differently abled. And
Yes.
It truly, some of the greatest thinkers and creators of our time have been differently abled. And
so true.
I could not agree with you more on that. So tell us a little bit of what it was like working on The Simpsons. How did you find that experience?
Cool. I'm sorry I got derailed there for a second, but I absolutely just wanted to throw that in. And it does apply to my experience on The Simpsons because, yes, what you were saying before was correct. Once I got in there, once I really got like under fire and was like, okay, our group, we didn't get a training session. Like we were the second group of new hires when they were like bringing in like between 5 and 10 new people at a time, which the studio hadn't done in over 15 years.
Oh, wow.
They hadn't had to hire a single new person because it was such a well-oiled machine. It had been going for so long already that they were like, they just had everybody they needed right in their place. Everything worked, so why mess with it? Well, once that all went away, once the movie started taking all the people that knew the show's production pipeline the best, they were like, oh my gosh, the show is we can't stop making episodes just because we're making a movie. Like, what are we going to do? So they bring us in. The group that came in before us had like, I think a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks to be trained before they were given actual scenes that were going to air. But apparently they ran out of time before they hired us because when we came in, they put us right on cruise. And they said, okay, we gave you your kind of like 1-day orientation, now go. And so I was like,
trial by fire.
Very much so. Definitely the trial by fire. And fortunately, the directors were very capable teachers. That's what I love about The Simpsons, and I'll sing their praises about that for the rest of my life. The directors were able to explain and actually show you what they needed you to do, and a lot of people that do art can't teach it, and vice versa. So when you find someone who can do both, you're like, well, this is perfect because I think most creative people are visual learners anyway. And so to have someone that can do it, but that can also explain it and show you how to do it, where you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And now I can do it exactly the same way you do, even if I'm not as good as you are yet. And that's what we had. So, we're just hustling. They needed us to understand the lingo. They needed us to pick everything up super fast. We were all working really late nights. I mean, it was, the way it worked was there was an orientation period or a probationary period where for 2 or 3 weeks, you're working full-time, getting paid, and you're actually making content that's going to be used in the show. So after the 3 weeks, they would say, okay, if your work holds up and the directors approve and everything like works out, like you can perform under deadline, you know, and not just turn in great art, but you can do it on the deadline, then we will bring you on officially as like full-time permanent crew members that will work for the whole season and most likely, you know, keep going. If you do really good on this season, we'll bring you back next season. And you just keep building your reputation and your rapport as an animator. So, and as a professional, you know, it was the first time that a lot of us were working in a professional environment. And then some of us were about the same age, you know, fresh out of college. I actually got hired before I graduated. I basically was told that I had the job before I graduated. So it was a wonderful day, a wonderful graduation, knowing like, man, I stayed in college 2 years longer than everybody else because I bounced around so much trying to find the right animation education. I was here for 6 years instead of 4, which nowadays is like normal, but, and common, I guess. But like, I just thought it paid off. Like it really worked out great. And, you know, of course, little did I know what I was in store for with the crazy hours. But you know what? It was really like going back to art school. It was like, wow, we're all here together and we're all in this crazy predicament and we're like all struggling, but we're all having fun and learning and we're all working on the Simpsons. Like, how did we get here? This is crazy. And like, this is not just Homer that I'm drawing. This is the Homer and the Bart and the whoever that's going to air on TV. Wow, this is kind of magical. And it really was. It was like a dream come true. And it was what I always wanted to do. And it was honestly like how I always hoped it would be. It felt very sort of 80s, 90s film festival art school, like, which is what I grew up on. You know, I grew up on all of these student films that the guys at Cal Arts were doing when they were in college, like Chris Sanders and Tim Burton and Paul Rubens. You know, like they created the Pee-wee character together, and they did Tim Burton's first movie together, which was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, like right out of Cal Arts. And the fact that I got to go there and experience that summer school class for 2 years. I was there in 98 and 99. And then, like, just to kind of know that history and have been part of it and have seen, like, this is where they slept. This is where their dorms were because it's been the exact same campus for, like, 50 years. And you really kind of got a taste for, like, oh, wow, look. And then the Aha music video that has those great, you know, black and white pencil renderings with graphite. That was a Cal Arts animator from the same era. All these guys were like 80s proteges. You know, they were products of this great time of innovation in the 1980s when a lot of really big risks were being taken because America was in this sort of mental state of, we want to break some new ground. We want to do something new. We want to do something like that's never been done before, and we're willing to go a little wide. We're willing to spend a little more money. We're willing to take a little more risk or a lot more risk and give these innovative people with these great minds that like we've been talking about, we're willing to give them the runway they need to like spread their wings and fly, and we're going to see what they come up with. There was a lot of faith put in the creative individual, and that unfortunately is not the world we live in today, which I'll get into a little bit later. But basically, yeah, like, so that we got a taste of that. We got a really big taste of that at The Simpsons when I started working there. And even though we were working, you know, sometimes 16 or 18-hour days, we were every day, you know, like Monday through Friday, we were just loving our lives because we had this camaraderie and we were getting to do what we always wanted to do.
Well, you have had some amazing and wonderful experiences and opportunities. So, and it sounds like although the days were long and the work was hard, it was wonderful, and you were having a great time because you loved what you were doing and you were following your passion and following your heart. And boy, you know, can't ask for more than that, really. That's very, very fortunate. So tell me now a little bit about, if we can move on to where the inspiration for your original character, Little Billy, comes from.
Awesome. Oh, I love it, and I appreciate you letting me talk about Little Billy on the show, because this is kind of what it all comes back to for me. The inspiration came from me being that kid in the 80s that, just didn't really fit in, that didn't really think he had a choice about, how he spent his time, or going around and, necessarily trying to make friends. Like, I really tried to do that for a while, and it just didn't seem to happen. And I remember at some point realizing, well, gosh, it's sad that I don't have the friends that you see the kids having on TV or in the movies, or I see other kids at school that all just sort of like travel in packs and get along. And that doesn't seem to be my life right now. But even though I wasn't really having this conscious conversation with myself, I was realizing that I still had a really great life and a really great childhood, because my parents understood me and supported me in everything that I did, and they helped me and were really patient and understanding with my Tourette's, and with helping me sort of balance that out and get that under control. And at the same time, I became aware that I had these wonderful, characters and friends in the toys that I played with and the shows that I watched. And the 80s was a really special time, which is why Little Billy is set in the 1980s. And this is probably the biggest inspiration for it. I grew up in a time where there was a whole new style of marketing being experimented with, and it was, as far as I know, the most powerful form of marketing to kids that's ever existed. They basically were creating entire worlds that revolved around these franchises. So, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or The Real Ghostbusters, there was an animated show for all of these great things, all of these properties that were created in the 80s or that were brought back and redesigned for kids in the 1980s as animated shows, whether it was for Saturday morning or after school prime time. You had this surplus, this because the 80s was the second golden age of animation, which we could get into the history of that, but all I really need to say, I think, about it is that you had guys like Don Bluth that broke away from Disney and started their own studios and were making these new masterpieces at a whole new level of quality that animation hadn't seen since the 1930s. And then you had guys like Ralph Bakshi who wanted to do the same thing but for television. And so TV and film, and even beyond animation, movies in general, were becoming completely hitting these new levels of quality, these new levels of innovation, where they wanted to really push the envelope and really create timeless works of cinema and timeless works of art. And then, of course, you had these were all the up-and-comers that we now know today that are so famous, like Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis, and Lou Scheimer was the guy who did He-Man and She-Ra and all of these shows that have now become notorious and legendary and kind of cult classics. So all of that stuff was brand new. It was just coming out at the right time. I was at that age where they were targeting me. They were targeting my age group. And they weren't just saying, hey, kids, we've created this new cartoon for you. You're going to love it. They were saying, and by the way, when you're done, while you're watching this, eat some cereal, some Ninja Turtle cereal, while you're watching the Ninja Turtle show. And then when you get done eating your cereal and watching the show, you can break out your Ninja Turtles action figures. And why stop there? You know what I mean? They had Ninja Turtle sleeping bags, Ninja Turtles curtains and bedspreads for your room, and backpacks. So no matter what you were doing, the entire kid's life was tended to and accommodated by these franchises that were these characters teach great lessons. They speak to the kids. They don't talk down to them. They try to like explain things to you about life in a way you can understand, but that's also like serious. It's not like, it's not pandering in any way. And it's stuff that you really need to learn. And I remember a lot of the times watching like the He-Man, or She-Ra, where afterwards they kind of came on and said, hey guys, we had a lot of fun today, but we want to talk to you about what happened in the episode. And it would be like a moralistic learning teaching moment where some character had a problem and they handled it the wrong way, and then they explain like why it was the wrong way to handle it and how they should have handled it, and they point out the lesson that they learned, and to remember like, guys, always remember, like if you guys stick together, you can accomplish anything. And it was this so positive, just outpouring of optimism and fun and really kind of hope for the future. Like stick together, really respect your friends, treat each other right, and you really can overcome anything. And I remember taking that to heart so hard because of my situation. I was like the kid who was still trying to make friends and figure out how to get friends, and I knew I wanted them, and I knew that I cared about people, and I wanted to like pour all of this emotion and care into others. And yet that wasn't an option at the time. I had no outlet for that. So hearing this from all of these like other areas that I already loved and respected in cartoons and films and TV shows, I was like, it gave me hope, and I was really inspired and motivated to just never give up and to just realize like, it's cool. It's going to happen. It's going to be okay no matter what. And, if you just like stick with it and stay strong and do what's right, you will prevail. And a lot of people look at that now as corny, but that is actually part of the reason that I never gave up, and I was able to stick with learning something as crazy and laborious and complicated as animation, and why I got good at starting something and actually finishing it. And
I think the world could use a little bit more corniness nowadays.
Thank you. So
don't you?
do I. I absolutely could not agree more, and I miss it. And that's why, that was my long answer of why I'm doing Little Billy. That's what inspired it, was that 80s mentality that I've never seen in any other decade, of just like, it was like what the 50s brought to the table with family values and, prosperity and a hopeful, positive, venture-based outlook on American life. Like anything is possible and the sky's the limit. And then it took that, and the 80s went even further with it. And they said like, you could do anything you want. You could be anything you want to be. Like you're capable. You are capable. You have the ability. And so to someone who is constantly being told that they had a disability, and even in not necessarily in those words, like, but that message still finds you, and you still sort of absorb that knowledge of like, well, you're different, and that's not necessarily a good thing because we said so. And then, sometimes people don't present it right, and it becomes a negative message. And so I was completely sort of almost defended against that by all of the positive messages I was getting from the entertainment I was being exposed to, thanks to my parents. And that's what I'm trying to provide today with Little Billy.
And I understand you also chosen to take a hiatus from The Simpsons to pursue the Little Billy project. So what are some of the challenges of that choice? I imagine there are both perks and challenges of making that decision. Absolutely.
That's a great question. And I would say the biggest challenge is, how am I going to pay my bills? The Simpsons is a wonderful job. The people are great. The work is fun, and it's extremely challenging and always hard, and presents problems. You have to be a constant problem solver as a layout artist. And I should probably just explain that a tiny bit. As a layout artist, you're not just a lead animator. You create the key poses of animation, all the major drawings that express the biggest movements or the biggest acting, but you also have to create rough backgrounds so that the background artist knows how to keep the final background drawing in the right proportion and perspective to your animation. And then you have to create an appealing composition with your framing of the scene so that you frame everything that's moving around in an appealing setup or an appealing arrangement on the screen, so that it just is cinematic, and it's like, oh, well, why are we seeing all of this empty space behind Homer on the left, and why are we seeing so much, like, or why is the top of Homer's head getting cut off? Those kinds of things you have to address and constantly be juggling all these issues. So you are well compensated for your time and hard work. And it's a union job, so you have to become a union member for the Animators Guild. It's the Animation Guild is the name of the union, and they require you to join. And then you pay your initiation fees, you pay your dues, and once you're in, once you're all paid up, it's not expensive really to stay a member as long as you're working full time at your union job, because they pay you well, and you also get all your health benefits and all of your dental and 401k and the pension and great perks through the union's plan. So when you leave and walk away from all of that, you have this huge new almost, dilemma of how am I going to pay for my bills, my insurance? You have to kind of make up for and replace all of these things. So that's been what I'm trying to do with littlebilly.com, and that's my answer to that dilemma. Is I started a Patreon for Little Billy at littlebilly.com, and there are links to there's a web store with products for sale. There's all these other websites. It's on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and any other social media platform pretty much you could possibly imagine. YouTube, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Like I've kept it in as many places as it can be viewed for whoever wants to choose whichever platform they like to use. It's if you prefer Twitter over everything else, Little Billy's on there. So I've done that all over the place, and there is a little bit of income starting to build on there. And so I just need to get it up to the point where I can pay the bills and have it be a self-sustaining thing, so that I don't have to work on Little Billy for, say, maybe 6 months or even 3 months, and then stop completely where production halts, and I have to go find another job to keep paying my bills. So you trade off your financial stability and security and really kind of like the safety net you have with a job in order to pursue an independent project, a passion project like Little Billy. So that's the biggest trade-off. The other huge blessing, though, that kind of balances it out is the sense of fulfillment and joy that I personally get, and I think pretty much all creator-based artists get from doing their own project is irreplaceable. It's so much more fun and fulfilling than any job you can work, no matter how good the job is. And the reason why is that the way the industry works is when you work for a company, you own nothing. Everything you create, you're creating something, and it's immediately being created into the existence of being owned by somebody else. So,
right.
You can't show anybody because it's all confidential, right? You can't see it before it airs, and so you basically are forced to create and then not share your work, which is one of the biggest joys of creating and being an artist. And then on top of that, that you don't own it, so once you're paid for the work you did, you're never going to make any money from it again. And it's not like being an animator, because it requires so many people to do animation. It's financially impossible for even the huge companies with the tons of money, to give every single person that worked on an animated production like a little residual. So it's not like being any other type of entertainment artist. If you're an actor or a musician or a writer or a voice actor, you can get a residual of the thing you worked on. So even when you're not working anymore, it's still paying a little bit of your bills, and sometimes all of your bills. And we don't have that security in animation. So when you think to yourself, well, I'm leaving behind my current security, but hopefully I'm going to replace it with a much greater security of being able to produce something and own 100% of it, and make all of the profit back forever because I own it.
Right. Well, that makes sense. But I understand you've chosen crowdfunding to pursue this as opposed to the more traditional methods of launching an animated series. What prompted you to make that choice?
That is a perfect question and a perfect segue, Gilda, because it's that reason that I just explained is why I did crowdfunding. When you pitch traditionally, you would pitch it. You'll pitch your idea, you'll pitch your show or your movie to the network, because the network is the company that actually controls what gets aired, right? The network is what the show will air on, and it's also who controls the distribution and the syndication. So you'd pitch your idea, and the way it has pretty much always worked is it's been a hard sell industry where it's, you know, you have to make a hard sell, and then it's really hard for you to sell others on your idea because of how many people are doing it. It's so competitive, and it's also a very market-driven industry. So if the person that you're pitching to doesn't think or have data that confirms that there is a current market and a current demand for your type of idea, it's an automatic no. And then let's say you have an idea that they do like and that they think, oh, this is perfect. This will be perfect for our, you know, young male audience ages 8 to 12, right? And they maybe, you know, 9 times out of 10, even when they say yes, they want to change your idea. And there is just it's almost an insurance policy for them, because the person that green lights the project has to ensure that they haven't made a mistake, that they don't have to come back to the CEO in 9 months or a year and a half or even after a few seasons and say, this was a mistake, we lost money.
Right.
And so,
yeah. And then they could lose their job.
Exactly. They're looking out for themselves. And it makes sense from a corporate standpoint, which is what we had to realize we were pitching to. You know, we're creators pitching to a non-creative entity, and a corporate. It's all about the corporate priority. So once you realize that, you realize, you know, this is not the ideal system for a creative project, and yet it's the standard system that's been in place for the entire history of the business, of the entertainment industry. And so what you realize is, if I pitch my project, even if they say yes, which is super rare, they're going to change it into something else because they have to protect themselves and ensure that, like, they put their seal of approval and their stamp on it. They change it into, like, the perfect version of what data said would sell. And then if they, you know, worst case scenario, they don't lose their hat. They're able to make a little bit of money, and they are able to maintain their job security. So I chose crowdfunding because to pitch this project would risk changing it too much. I mean, and it's pitching it to a system that is proven over and over for decades that this is how the acceptance of a project works. You get, you know, you get a deal, you get paid, you know, something up front. Hopefully you get contracted to stay involved with the creative process. And then maybe if you're really lucky, you get like a really small piece of the pie on the back end, where your project, if it blows up, could make the company that invested in it millions or even billions of dollars. And then you're getting like a little tiny piece of that. And in the grand scheme, I see why people would say, fine, you know, I made this, you're paying me a lot of money for it to own it, because they do buy the entire ownership from you. You. Once again, you go back to not owning your own thing, which means you have limited control. If you have whatever control your contract says you have. And I guess, you know, this is all sort of semantics. What I'm getting at is that crowdfunding gives you complete control of both the creative process and the message that your project sends and how you produce it. So you don't have to cut corners if you don't want to. You don't have to limit yourself to doing something that's just good enough. You can actually do a masterpiece, and then the icing on the cake would be that you get paid for your masterpiece and you get all of the money for all of the hard work you put in.
And you don't have to answer to anybody but yourself.
Right. And you know what that allows is for the message to not get watered down or changed. It allows for the integrity of the project to be maintained. And so that positive message that I want to send to my audience doesn't get compromised. And then if I want to say do even more with my project, I can, because I'm not bound by any contract.
So what are your current and future plans for Little Billy?
Well, at the moment, I am producing the first animated short. So the current plan is to finish the short. I got one other artist working with me now. I have managed to expand my crew from one person to 2 people. So I've doubled.
All right. Moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes, we're really starting to move now. So I've got 2, it's 2 of us. I'm doing the animation and pretty much all of the production work. And then my friend Joe Simcoe, who's based out of New York, he's I would say the master painter, the main guy over at Garbage Pail Kids at Topps Trading Cards. And anybody who remembers the 80s or lived through the 80s or is nostalgic for the 80s knows that Garbage Pail Kids were like one of the trademark images from the 1980s. That look and that style of that artwork, which, and by the way, they're still being produced today. I mean, he's currently employed working on new cards. So it's the quintessential cartoon look of the 1980s. And I thought, how cool would it be to actually make the background paintings of animation in that style? It's never been done. I've looked, I've tried to find it. I've never seen it anywhere. And I love that no one else has done that. So that's what this first animated short will be. Joe's doing the backgrounds, GPK style. I'm doing all the other work, the animation and editing and production, which is like all the phases of animation production plus the editing and the audio and everything else. So my hope is that I can eventually hire one more animator, so there'll be 3 of us, and I can have some help with the heavy lifting. And I have one person interested and who's already committed. They said they would be a part of it as soon as I can afford to pay them. Back to littlebilly.com. Please go there if you guys want to see this become a reality sooner than later, and support. Like, all I'm asking for is $5 a month, which boils down to less than $1 a week. Or a little more, a little more than $1 a week. It's like
$1 and a quarter or so, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's like, 1/4 of the cost of a cup of coffee or something, and so it's just as minimal as you can get. But enough people that are subscribed at that amount level will make, a big difference and go a long way. So everyone working together is kind of my whole approach, is like, let's go back to that 1980s mentality of like teamwork, and let's crew up, let's band together and do something bigger than ourselves, and do something really big and groundbreaking and innovative and new. So that's what Little Billy's doing right now. I also just launched a comic strip, very like Sunday Funnies, old school newspaper style, where not necessarily once a week, but just at least once a month, and as often as possible, there'll be a new comic strip that shows you a little bit more into Little Billy's world. And I want to give everybody something fun to enjoy while I'm producing the animation, because I know it takes a long time, and it's just no fun to wait that long for new content. So the comic strip is out. The first short, I should say, is on the way. And long term, I would just love for the Little Billy Patreon to be bringing in enough money every month, ideally it would be 5 figures or more, to actually start creating a full crew that would produce a full half-hour pilot and eventually produce an entire first season. Even if it's only like 3 or 4 episodes, I've written an entire 13, 14 episode season. I have the pilot script, the first script is almost done, and the other 13 episodes have all been outlined already. So I've created an entire story arc for a full season 1. Now it's just a matter of having a budget to hire the manpower to get this thing made.
Right. Well, it sounds like a wonderful alliance that you have an amazing project that you're creating, and I personally cannot wait to see that first animation. Truly, I'm really looking forward to that. But I do want to ask you another question. What's the best advice you can give to a young person who's considering a career in animation or perhaps just starting out on their career path? Is there something that a person with special needs should pay particular attention to?
Yeah, I would say whether you have, a neurodiversity or not, whether you're differently abled or neurodynamic or just, not, if you're someone who's just trying to get into the sort of the growth arc of becoming a professional in the field of art or animation, the biggest thing I can stress is fundamentals. You want to focus on the fundamentals of drawing because that is where your core skill set lies. And what I mean by the fundamentals are your life drawing and figure drawing, where you're actually drawing live models or live, of humans or animals that are posing. There's classes and workshops everywhere now that you can do this in. And that is your cornerstone. I mean, life drawing is the cornerstone of your fundamental art education. That's your classical skill. And then the reason is because drawing from life is the most challenging. So if you can draw from life, you can draw anything eventually once you master that. And then from there, there's perspective, right? Your draftsmanship skills, which would be like perspective and proportion and composition and color theory. These are all traditional skills that are taught in traditional art programs at these schools like we mentioned, the LA Academy of Figurative Art, Otis, the Animation Academy. For animation specifically, you want to focus on squash and stretch, the animation principles, which are squash and stretch, drawing through anticipation and extremes and follow through and all of these ways to make things feel like they have weight, feel like they when they move that they're solid, right? They're solid forms moving in space. They don't shrink or grow as you keep drawing them moving. And but you can give them flow and balance and bounce and all of these great things when you learn these skills. So for anybody who wants to go into more computer animation or CG, you still have to learn those skills. There's no way around that. I used to think but I just want to draw cartoons, so I don't have to learn all this detail drawing, right? But you have to start there because then you can only then can you apply that to your cartoony drawing in a way that it makes it work.
Really? Yeah, I mean, you walk before you skip before you run, right?
Exactly. You have to.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I say you always have to learn the rules and master the rules before you can start to bend and break the rules.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So if our listeners have questions or want to know more, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Awesome. Thanks, Gilda. The best way to learn more about Little Billy is to go to littlebilly.com. All the links to the social media pages are there at the top, along with the link to the online store. There should be a contact button, and if that doesn't work or there isn't one, you can just email me directly at chanceraspberry@hotmail.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chance, for your time today and the wonderful and fun information that you shared with me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Gilda. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been a real joy.
And I also want to thank our listeners for spending a part of their day with us. I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.